So, the question that's coming to me, or the question that's coming to me right now is, why develop a sitting practice? Specifically as it pertains to the work that we do with people. And it seems to me in that regard, it's the same but perhaps more highly charged version of the reason why anyone would want to, which is that a couple of millennia ago, Buddha described his experience of his deep inward gazing, where he had the direct experience of the nature of the mind and the nature of our life in a body with a mind. And as he sought to figure out how to explain that to people, where he landed was the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths were created using the medicine of the time, Ayurvedic medicine. And the Four Noble Truths are laid out as a diagnosis, as a list of symptoms and causes, as a cure, a potential cure, or how could we get better, and a prescription. And the other related teaching, or one of the many other related teachings, but the other related teaching that comes up for me right now is that Buddha repeatedly said, in as much as we have what he said through the oral tradition written down 500 years later, and we hope that there wasn't too much of a game of telephone that went on, but repeatedly taught that he taught only one thing, or he taught suffering and the end of suffering. Right? When people came to him and said, tell us about God, tell us if you're God, tell us about all the metaphysical hijinks that are out there, he repeatedly brought people back to the ground, to the logistics, to the, it's obviously, it's the dilemma of life he was describing and the possible liberation from that dilemma. So there's a metaphysical aspect to that, but still he kept pointing back to suffering and the end of suffering. So when I think of groups of people like this who go out of their way to become either vocationally and or avocationally helpers, people who are engaged in a sincere hope that suffering can end, and if it can't end, that it can at least be reduced. And if that suffering is reduced, going again back to variety of ways that Buddha explained things, there are a number of explanations or a number of teachings that talk about a gradual process, right? A gradual awakening, a gradual process of being able to see deeply into suffering, see deeply into impermanence, see deeply into the impersonal nature of things, and then become liberated through that deep seeing, and then the deep seeing into not the other side of that, but what else there is. So there's teachings that talk about that gradual process, and then there's the teachings that are like, snap of the fingers. And Are they in conflict with each other, or are they parts of the same experience? Right? And so, if we are engaged, or we are engaged in this sincere desire, this stirring of loving kindness, this stirring of compassion to, again, I'll say it again, go out of our way, right? Because not everybody gets stirred this way. So to go out of our way to help others, which is essentially, we've fallen into, whether or not it has this name or the accumulated wisdom of Buddha and the Buddhist teachers of the ages, we've fallen into the Eightfold Path. We've fallen into an understanding that the primary descriptor of being a human being in a body is that it is often unsatisfactory, and that it contains suffering, and time-space continuum experience of it contains suffering. So there's lots of ways to respond to that. And one way is to respond to it with loving kindness and compassion towards others, towards ourselves. And then as we, those of us who work in the field of addiction, it's very easy to see the role that craving and clinging and attachment and fear-based action plays in suffering. And again, that's what Buddha said: craving, clinging, attachment, unhealthy attachment, not the newfangled language of psychology. And so if I turn towards this path, whether or not I know I'm on that path, and then start to investigate this craving and clinging being the alpha and omega of suffering, then it behooves me to look at the fourth truth and say, oh, well, so, wow, apparently, as far as I can see, you, Buddha, are approaching this as a psychologist, not unlike the psychologists of today, and are saying that this eightfold path is how we can reduce and perhaps end suffering. So, I've been moved by compassion and loving kindness to engage every fiber of my being, depending on the day, in this action, in this path, in this endeavor, in this way of being with others. Having to remember, and this is, I feel like, what, when Dave was talking earlier about, how he was happy that this is a retreat and that this is us feeding ourselves. My experience has been, this might not resonate for everybody, but my experience has been that many, many helpers are very able to focus on that outward walking of the path of trying to end other suffering, and sometimes, or often, we get lost. That, coming from the perspective of, I think there are 8 billion people on Earth now, something like that, right? That's a big number. And so 7,999,999,999 of them are worthy of our kindness and compassion. And there's one. Who is that? Unlucky, unfortunate person? And I'm speaking from experience. I've been there, done that, seen the movie, wrote the sequel, right? So what we're doing here together is adding that person. And again, like I said, it might not resonate. Number one, it might not resonate at all from your experience, or it might not resonate kind of where you're at now. Like maybe, like I know that I have improved a great deal in that area, right? I'm very clear that, or I've become more clear that if I am not taking care of this, probably not going to have a lot of success in taking care of the other. Not in any like nefarious or super toxic way, although that can happen too, but just in a kind of, I'm not quite present, I'm not quite healthy enough to show up in the way that my intention brought me to the work. And if that happens long enough, that starts to wear me down, right? That it's a little bit of a snowball, because my intention doesn't change generally, right? The intention, it can weaken, it can get sidetracked, but it's generally still there. There have been times in my life where I've kind of noticed, where did it go? Where did it go? And the answer to that almost always is not, oh my goodness, it's gone, and it's gone forever. The answer is like, what do I need to do to reboot? It's on me. So another thing about Buddha and his psychology is this idea of personal responsibility. That I get to marshal, whatever it is. And again, different folks have different views of this aspect of it. My feeling of Buddha's teaching is that he didn't say there wasn't a God, and he didn't say there is a God, so it's optional. Within that framework, either way, the personal responsibility to take care of myself and do my due remains, whether there's a God or not. So, coming back to that, notion of the psychologist Buddha wanting to heal the world, tikkun olam, for those of you of the Jewish faith or in the know about such a thing, which means heal the world. It's a primary teaching. So in his goal of healing, he noticed he had healed himself, or he had ended suffering for himself with this path, with this set of this wisdom and these actions. So if I spend my time trying to accumulate, or not the best word, but trying to soak up as much of that wisdom in order to fuel that intention, and then those three ethical factors of right speech, right action, and right livelihood. It's almost like these retreats are designed, or they're really kind of right livelihood retreats. And so this rubber meeting the road, walking my talk part of the path, right? How do I get that right? I get that right by allowing myself to soak up that wisdom, to feed that initial intention. I see it, it's interesting because I can track back a little bit of my own sort of path as a matter of fact, I can track back pretty well. Like I remember being 6 years old, and my grandfather, who was the, Grand Master of Tikkun Olam, just basically one of those people who had hundreds of people that he had helped at his funeral. Do you know what I mean? That spirit of, and I looked at him and I felt his energy, and I was like, that's, yeah, me too, right? Like I said, I don't know if it's everybody gets this at some point in their lives, but I was like, me too, that's what I want to do, right? And now I can see it. I see it in my own kid at the age of 6, and I'm grateful that I'm seeing it, and I realize that it's, there's no guarantees, right? And I see her naturally forming this loving kindness and compassion and this deep empathy and curiosity about people's suffering. And so I want to support that. And so it's the same. It's basically the 6-year-old me is saying, me too, and how can we support ourselves in this endeavor? That it's like we've chosen, but it also chose us. You can look at it even from, without going egoic on it. You can look at it from, and I'm saying this for all of us, we can look at it from like the story of the Buddha as we understand the story of the Buddha, right? Who was shielded from all things suffering and had a stirring of, this doesn't seem right. I'm going to go find out if this is actually what life is about. I don't think it is. And then he goes out and it's just like bam, 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 suffering. Old age, sickness, death. And he also saw the robed spiritual seeker, spiritual practitioner, spiritual teacher. And said, oh, that's an option. So again, without getting grand about it, in the 21st century, a lot of the people who, if we were without internet, television, all the different distractions, modern world, technology, I don't know. I'm thinking a bunch of us would possibly be in robes, right? And using the monastic framework for what it is that we do. The monastic, in a lot of ways, spends a lot more time on this project that we're working on here. While at the same time, one of their goals is to reduce the suffering of all beings. So whatever I can do to obtain and maintain the same sort of not results, but just aspects of practice that keep us in a place where we can continue to march forward and provide help. That it's harder, but we can do it, and we can be of that kind of spiritual help to people. Because again, I've never had any other experience other than the one that I've had, which is, spirituality and psychology and everything else, that any other words that kind of float around that it's just the same thing, or it's all one big path. And the last thing I'll say around this is, then there's the last 3 factors, which are all about meditation, right? Right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. So, that's the Buddhist slant, is that that's how powerful sitting practice can be in this bigger picture of taking care of ourselves and in both absorbing and intuitively and organically raising up the wisdom that we already contain. Buddha didn't consider that he had just manufactured something out of things that he grabbed. It's all here. So my hope is that some or all of that was helpful, both from, I like to think of it almost kind of from a informational perspective, a meditative perspective, and a cheerleading perspective. So, thank you for your attention to that.